People of the future live their lives via robots so that they can avoid danger and stay young and beautiful forever. But this way of life is about to be opposed. A company named VSI, led by a man named Lionel Cantor, creates robotic body parts that connect to human brains and allow humans complete control and sensations, just like a real body. Soon, this leads to the creation of complete robotic bodies for people who are fully paralyzed. The military finds a use for robotic bodies that can be controlled by human minds, since this way they can send the robots to war instead of real humans. After the robots are mass-produced by the military, they become cheap, and civilians start buying them. By using robots or surrogates, people go out and enjoy the world without the risk of being in an accident or catching a disease. And as an added bonus, people can look young and fit forever. Pretty soon, a bill is passed in Congress, and the use of surrogates for living one's life becomes legal. Several years down the line, the whole world now uses surrogates to live their lives, except for special regions where some groups of people have rejected artificial living and live as humans. These people form a cult that is led by a man called the Prophet, who preaches against living as a surrogate. In the present day, a boy is traveling in a fancy car and speaking to his father, thanking the father for lending him his surrogate. Unbeknownst to the boy, someone on a motorbike is following him. He goes to a club and dances with a hot woman, proceeding to make out with her in a back alley. As the two are making out, the man from the bike appears. The boy tells him to get lost, and moments later, a huge electrical surge is felt throughout the alley. The man on the bike looks to make a getaway, and amidst the getaway causes a car accident involving several people. Agent Greer and Agent Peters of the FBI are called in to investigate the crime scene. As they arrive on the scene, they immediately notice that the eyes of both the boy's surrogate and the woman's surrogate are fried along with their memory chips, which is unusual. The boy's surrogate is unregistered, but the girl's unit is registered to someone named Cameron. They arrive to question Cameron, who is a middle-aged man but find that he has died along with his surrogate, which is normally impossible. Greer and Peters are stumped. Greer, or rather his surrogate, arrives home, observes himself lying in his control chair, and then goes into its charging module. Greer gets out of his control chair and goes to take a look at his son's room, which has his son's toys and pictures, but his son is mysteriously not there. Greer's wife Maggie comes out of her room and he asks her if she'd like to take a break and go on vacation. Maggie is enthusiastic about it, however. She realizes that Greer means they should go in their actual bodies and not with surrogates, and she does not like that idea. Greer says he feels like they never spend time together anymore, to which Maggie replies they're together all day. However, Greer points out that their surrogates are together, not them. Maggie tells him it's better like this. At West San Diego College, a boy is found dead in his control chair. He is the boy that was operating the boy's surrogate from the incident earlier. The director of the FBI, Stone, tells everyone to keep the details of the case under wraps because people cannot know that they can get hurt while using a surrogate. Greer goes through the final memories of the boy's surrogate and notices that the motorbike man pulled out some kind of weapon before the incident, meaning that this was a murder. They receive news that the boy who died is named Jared Cantor, the son of Lionel Cantor, the infamous inventor of surrogates who was kicked out of his own company, VSI, after he tried to change its direction. And the company's board didn't agree. Greer and Peters arrived to speak with Lionel and find out that Jared was using Lionel's surrogate at the time he was attacked. Lionel is very emotional, and Greer says he knows how Lionel feels. He reveals he has lost a son himself. Peters is surprised at this revelation. Greer points out that since Jared was using Lionel's surrogate at the time of the murder, it is likely that the murderer intended to kill Lionel and not Jared. Lionel realizes that he might have caused his son's death and unplugs from his surrogate. He is inconsolable. Greers and Peters arrive at VSI and question their VP about how a surrogate being attacked might lead to the death of its operator. The VP and the lawyers of the company seem defensive and say that it is simply not possible, since every time a surrogate is about to be harmed, a failsafe kicks in and prevents operators from actually being hurt or even feeling the pain. Greer and Peters realize they won't get any answers here and go to the engineering department of the company instead. They ask the engineer what could cause damage of this nature to a surrogate, and he says that it looks like the surrogate was overloaded. Greer asks him if he has seen anything like this before, and he says that he has seen the eyes removed of some surrogates from the army. Greer and Peters arrive at a military installation and speak to a general about whether or not such a weapon exists that kills a surrogate and its operator with it. The general reveals that it's not possible, and that if such a weapon existed, he'd know about it. As for the solider surrogates, he reveals that they remove eyes and motherboards from surrogates for inspection all the time. Greer is not convinced by this. Peters figures out that the man on the motorbike is someone named Miles Strickland, who has been arrested once before for robbery but let out without any punishment. This means that someone in the law enforcement agency is facilitating him. She puts out a notice for his arrest. The surveillance wing of the FBI spots Miles and calls in Greer and Peters. When they arrive, they are greeted by Bobby Saunders, who tells them that Miles is currently being pursued by the police. Greer goes to join the pursuit while Peters sticks around. Bobby, who is a human and refuses to use a surrogate, shows Peters how the surveillance wing has access to every surrogate on the planet and can immediately deactivate any one of them for law enforcement purposes. He demonstrates this as he notices two people are assaulting a woman in a hotel room, and he immediately gets a warrant against them and deactivates them. Meanwhile, Greer is chasing Miles in a helicopter when Peters warns him on the radio that he is about to enter the territory allocated to the people who live without surrogates, and that he does not have jurisdiction there. Greer ignores her warning and continues his pursuit. Just as it looks like the police have Miles cornered, he pulls out the surrogate killing weapon and kills several officers. He fires it at the helicopter and the pilot dies, but Greer unplugs from his surrogate just in time to be saved. Miles enters the regular humans' territory, and Greer plugs into his surrogate again to find his helicopter crashing. Greer chases Miles throughout the human territory while the people mobilize against him. Greer finally catches up to Miles and demands him to show the weapon, but just as Greer is about to inspect the weapon, the humans arrive and shoot his surrogate. Greer wakes up back in his home and is in bad condition. He unplugged before Miles's weapon could kill him, but he still sustained damage. Maggie arrives and takes him to the hospital. Back in human territory, Miles wakes up to find that his home is being searched by the Prophet's men. The Prophet asks him where he got the weapon and who hired him to kill Lionel. Miles replies he doesn't know because the man who hired him never met him, and they only spoke through the phone. In the hospital, Greer wakes up as Stone comes to visit him. Stone tells Greer that he is suspended for entering the human region without jurisdiction. It caused a war between the human regions and surrogate regions. Greer will not be getting another surrogate unless he gets reinstated. Greer gets out of the hospital in his human form, and Peters arrives to see him. Coming outside in his human form after so long, Greer feels severely vulnerable and anxious. Peters suggests that he should get a temporary low-quality surrogate, but he refuses. Greer arrives in the human territory and sees that a funeral is being held for Miles. He watches little kids play and listens to the Prophet's speech about how people living on surrogates are not living a real life. The Prophet also mentions that the time when surrogates will be wiped out from the world is close at hand. Greer approaches the Prophet and tells him that Miles had a weapon, and he would do anything to get it back. The Prophet assures him that if he finds the weapon, he'll contact Greer. Later, it is revealed that the Prophet actually has found the weapon, but has no intention of giving it to Greer. Greer is contacted by Lionel, who is now using a different surrogate. Greer informs him that Miles is dead, and was most probably killed by his own people. Lionel says that the weapon Miles used is extremely sophisticated, and it could not have been made by the people in the human territory. Someone else hired Miles, someone who could spend billions of dollars on such a weapon. Lionel tells Greer to continue the investigation to get justice for his son. He asks Greer how his son died, and Greer reveals it was in a car accident before surrogates became common. Greer arrives home and finds that there is a party happening where friends of Maggie are doing some kind of surrogate drug. Maggie assures him that it's just some people her friend brought over and she has no part in this. Greer goes into his room. When he comes out, he finds one of the guys trying to flirt with Maggie and he loses his cool. He beats the guy up and everyone laughs at him for trying to beat up a robot and hurting himself. Greer leaves and Maggie follows him. She asks him what he wants from her, and he says that he just wants her. She says he already has her, but he says he wants her real self and not her surrogate. Maggie says things have changed, but Greer says she is just being like this because of their son's accident, because she has been scared to come out into the real world ever since. Maggie leaves. Meanwhile, someone breaks into Peter's house, kills her, and takes control of her surrogate. Greer finds out that there was a big contract between the military and VSI that got scrapped. He deduces that this must have been for the weapon. He confronts the military general again, who confesses that the weapon was created by VSI to end wars by killing all the enemy's soldier surrogates at once. But when they found out that the weapon disabled the surrogate's failsafe and killed the operators as well, they shut its production down. Greer reveals that one is still in production and is with the humans, and the general immediately calls for an operation to retrieve it. Meanwhile, the Prophet gives the weapon to his men and tells them to take it to Agent Peters. Greer goes to meet Maggie at her work and tells her he thinks about their son all the time. He says he just wants to be with her. Maggie says she thinks about their son too, and the only reason she can face the world is that she doesn't actually come out and lives through a surrogate. Greer tries to get her to open up about it, but she refuses to speak to him anymore and unplugs. Soldiers attack the human territory in search of the weapon, and they shoot at the Prophet. It turns out that the Prophet is actually a surrogate who is run by Lionel Cantor. Peters meets up with Greer and reveals to him that Miles was actually hired by the FBI, which means that Stone is dirty. Greer confronts Stone and asks him why he hired Miles to kill Lionel. Stone deflects, and Greer attacks his surrogate and uses his sign-in to get FBI documents. Peters and Greer run from the FBI while Greer goes through the documents. They reveal that Lionel has been funding the human regions and their anti-surrogacy, which is why Stone and VSI wanted to kill him. Peters says that Stone would need access codes of the weapon to use it, so he needs to find those to use as evidence against Stone. However, as soon as Greer finds the access codes, Peters crashes the car and leaves with the codes and the weapon. Greer tries to chase her, but she is a surrogate and he is human, so it's pointless. Greer figures out that Lionel is operating Peters' surrogate. He calls Bobby Saunders to warn him that Peters is going to try to connect to all the surrogates and use the weapon to kill them, but Peters is already there holding Bobby hostage. Stone confronts Lionel at FBI. He tells Lionel that he is crazy for inventing surrogates and then going against his own inventions. Stone reveals that he and VSI tried to kill Lionel because they knew he was working to abolish surrogacy. Lionel kills Stone using the weapon as vengeance for his son. Greer arrives at Lionel's house and tries to convince him against his plan. Lionel says that he never should have invented surrogates, and that humans need to live like humans again. Greer warns him that he is going to kill billions, and he'll only be becoming a murderer. Lionel says surrogacy is an addiction, and to kill the addiction he needs to kill the addict. He connects the weapon to all the surrogates in the world, and takes a cyanide pill to commit suicide. Greer takes over Peter's surrogate, and with the help of Bobby, disconnects all the operators to save their lives. The weapon is still connected and is going to fry all the surrogates. Bobby shows Greer how to save them, but at the very last moment, Greer decides to let it happen. All the surrogates in the world get destroyed, and people are forced to come out as themselves. Greer goes home and finds Maggie in their son's room, and the two share a warm, human embrace. The end. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this.